This is Racing News 365, and it is time for our fan questions. And given that we've hit 5,000 subscribers, we've got 5 questions. 5,000 was, I think, a bit of a push, and we'd be here until probably the end of the season. So, coming up first, and apologies if I get any of these names wrong, I will do my best. Coming up first is a question from Jamie and Sam. I'm going to throw this one to you. Why did Charles Leclerc pit 4 times in the Austrian Grand Prix?
Well, I mean, it's a very good question, and Ferrari's strategy and even their recent strategies have mystified all of us at times. Looking back at Canada, where they were undeniably on the wrong tire. Realistically, I think they felt that they were very much in the points runnings. They felt so it wasn't a case of just we're just going through the motions. We're just trying a few things. I think their strategy was essentially almost an old school. Let's put you on fresh rubber and just go flat out and see where we end up. There was damage from his car, which undoubtedly came into it. We saw him pit on the first lap, and we knew that was the case. So whether or not there was nursing some of that and making tweaks to try and kind of rectify that. But yeah, I'll be honest, it was one more stop than I was expecting. You would think in that scenario that you'd pivot to a 3-stop, but as we know, Ferrari went to a 4-stop. So yeah, quite an unusual approach.
And Ian, the next question, I'm going to throw it your way, and it comes from Brit. What's up with Aston Martin this year? They're really far behind, says Brit.
Sounds like I don't think you got that name wrong. I think Brit would be very difficult to mispronounce. So I think you'd be on safe ground with that one, Nick. Look, Mike Cracker's admitted it on numerous occasions. They've just got things wrong this year in terms of the development of the car. They're confident, as confident as they can possibly be, that they will eventually turn the corner, but this is a slow-going process for them. They've now confirmed that their new wind tunnel won't be online, and it won't be part of the development of next year's car until much, much later this year. It was due to come online about 2/3 of the way, I believe, into this season, and there was going to be the possibility that they'd be able to use it in terms of development for next year's car. That now looks like it's not going to be the case, according to Mike Crack. And as I say, they've just got things wrong developmentally, just as they did last season as well. They've taken a wrong turn, and it's leading to considerable frustration within the drivers, as we've seen over the weekend. Look at that performance from Fernando Alonso in Spielberg in the Red Bull Ring. Just probably one of his, I'm going to use Sam's phrase here, one of his most off-color weekends that we've seen for quite some time from the two-time world champion. He's expressed his own hope in the past, believing from what he has seen coming that Aston Martin will turn that corner. But right now, the team is really struggling. It's trying to get a grasp on that car, but they know they've got parts coming. But how long it's going to take for them to turn that corner, really, it's one of those that only time's going to tell. But yes, they've just got things wrong this year.
Yeah, it's a very difficult situation, Aston Martin, right now. And I'm going to throw the next question to you as well, Ian. And it comes from Inferno. This person, I'm going to slightly change the wording of the question, given that mid-season is actually technically after the British Grand Prix. The first half of the season has suddenly flown by. Can you see Daniel Ricciardo or Yuki Tsunoda replace Sergio Perez at Red Bull? Big one.
I mean, previously we've discussed the possibility of whether Daniel Ricciardo would be replaced at RB. Yeah. We know most recently that Helmut Marko has come out with a remark indicating that Liam Lawson is most likely going to be in the RB seat. Whether that was said to really give Daniel Ricciardo a G up, and almost like prod, as if to say, get your act together, only Helmut Marko probably knows in his own mind. We've certainly seen over the course of the Austrian Grand Prix weekend a better performance from Daniel Ricciardo. Yeah. He outqualified his teammate, and he scored points, aided, of course, by the Max Verstappen Lando Norris crash. But nevertheless, he was in the right place to score a number of points. So that will help him considerably. As to whether either Daniel or Yuki will be in the Red Bull at any point this given season, I very much doubt that. I believe that Checo will at least see out the season. And as we discussed on our podcast earlier in the week, I mentioned then that Christian Horner came out with some very unusual comments relating to Checo Perez's situation, because as we know, Perez signed a 1+1 deal earlier this year, the one being 2025, the plus one being for 2026. However, he is under-delivering without a shadow of a doubt, and I'm using Christian Horner's words there. He is under-delivering in that RB20 compared to what we've seen of Max Verstappen. Max 0.4 of a second quicker on his pole lap than his rival. If that's the case in that RB20, then without a shadow of a doubt, Sergio Perez should have been alongside him on the front row at the Red Bull Ring. So, but nevertheless, he was further back down the grid, and another underwhelming performance. Did okay in a badly damaged car in the Grand Prix to get a reasonable number of points. Again, predominant due to Max and Lando's crash. But will he be replaced over the course of the season? I doubt it very much. I really do. I know we've seen Red Bull in the past, RB in the past, has changed its drivers mid-season, but I don't think they would do that to Checo Perez. I think there's probably a greater possibility of him not being in that car for next year, as I say, simply on the basis of some very unusual Christian Horner comments relating to Checo's contract.
Definitely a situation that will be monitored very closely, particularly as obviously more driver market action takes place. The next question is going to be for all three of us, and it comes from Says. And once and for all, each of us can give our answer very briefly. Who's at fault, Max or Lando? I'll kickstart things, and I believe racing instant. There was so many, close calls in the build-up, and as I've pointed out in the F1 update, both of them were off the circuit at times, pushing to the limit and beyond. And I think in the end, it was just both drivers being over-ambitious through hard racing. Sam, for you, who's at fault?
If you're apportioning fault, it's Max. And as I've said before, I think the penalty was fair. I think that was spot on. It's easy to look at the fact Lando retired and go, "Oh, that wasn't tough enough." Penalty was spot on, but Lando needs to be a little bit wiser, and I think he will be moving forward. I think he learnt a lot about how to fight Max yesterday.
Ian.
Max Verstappen, without a shadow of a doubt. The stewards called it, and if you watched Anthony Davidson's analysis on Sky Sports F1 post the Grand Prix, he laid it out in detail as well as to what Max did, moving across under braking, which you just cannot do, which he'd done previously as well on two previous occasions when Lando tried to get past him. David Coulthard said the same thing. Jolyon Palmer said the same thing. So when you look at those guys and they've got experience of being in Formula One in racing cars, I think, you have to listen to their expertise. But from everything that's come out, and even 70% of our viewers and our readers thought the same thing in our poll that we put out, over 50,000 votes on that. And 70% of you pointed the finger quite clearly at Max Verstappen. So I think it's an overwhelming Max, you were in the wrong on this occasion. Just hold your hands up and admit it for once, pal.
Yeah, huge numbers in that poll. And Sam, I'm going to fire the final fan question to you, and it comes from Polly Doris. With the exception of Austria, where obviously Max had exceptional pace until he struggled with grip in the closing stages, what's been the cause of Red Bull's, being so slow in recent rounds, and obviously what's resulted in them being caught by the likes of McLaren and Mercedes in particular getting closer?
I think for me, the big thing, I'll say for me, the big thing generally is it's not a case of opinion here. What is happening is that at the start of the regulation cycle in 2022, the Red Bull was able to run much lower to the ground, use its floor to much better effect than the other cars. And that gave it a considerable performance advantage because the effectiveness and efficiency of the floor in ground effects F1 cars is much more important than it previously was. And it's not solely aero anymore. It's also the floor. So that was where their advantage lay. As teams have developed and they've progressed and porpoising or bouncing hasn't been as much of an issue, teams are able to run a much closer to the floor. And that has started to remove some of Red Bull's advantage. But what it's also done simultaneously is expose some of the weaknesses in their cars, in their chassis. And that is that there's an underlying stiffness to the suspension in the Red Bull cars. We've seen it the last couple of years, and it's particularly pronounced with the RB20. And that is what is then resulting in the curb riding issues that we see at your races like Monaco, Montreal, street tracks for, essentially. So that is the big thing. And also in terms of aerodynamics, I think we very much thought that they've got a far superior aerodynamic package, and I think it is. But what you do see, particularly with aero, is a convergence over a regulation cycle and almost a copycat. And that's what we're seeing from other teams, is they are starting to make their cars more similar to Red Bull, a philosophy that works. And that's, again, why you've seen Red Bull go with a slightly different direction this year to try and kind of stave off the opposition. But those are the things that have essentially kind of all come together and has meant that the grid itself is coming together increasingly. And it's not just the leading cars. You look at, a Q1 and there's a second or so separating most of the cars. This is a very, very tight pack amongst the 20.
Great answer. And Jamie, Brit, Inferno says, and Polydorus, thank you so much for your fan questions. And obviously for those who want us to be answering your questions, be sure to fire them into racingnews365.com.